Today, my name is Ken Levinson. I'm the Executive Director of WIDA. When we planned this event 3 weeks ago, we knew that Brexit was on the way. We knew there might be some developments happening. We kind of had no idea we'd be in the middle of 3 votes. I think I had reached out to our speakers, and I think one of the first ones was Heather Conley, and she said she was happy to do it. Oh, by the way, do you know there's going to be 3 votes in a row happening right in the middle of your event? I asked her to please pass along my thanks to the Prime Minister for scheduling that to help drive up attendance for our event. President Trump has actually been quite accommodating with WIDA's agenda as well, with keeping things so busy on trade for the past couple of years, and we're very grateful for all of you for looking to us to help talk about some of these issues and help bring some more understanding on some of the critical issues facing the United States and the world of trade. Today we have a fantastic panel. We've had a number of events over the last couple of years looking at Brexit. Most of those have been opining about the relative merits of various perspectives on whether Britain should leave the EU and under what terms. Today is a slightly different conversation, more about what is business thinking, what is happening, how is business thinking about this. Not meant to be the discussion forum today to decide whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. I think we've had some of those discussions, and a lot of you have views. I'm sure panelists do, but that's not the point of today's event, which is more to talk about the perspective of business. We have a few upcoming events. You can see them on the back of your flyer. We'll be hosting Senator Pat Toomey at the end of the month on March 28th. He has legislation, as many of you may know, on Section 232 and reasserting some congressional authority over trade policy. We'll be having him speak, and then we'll have a panel discussion following that. And then the following week, we'll be talking about U.S.-Japan trade, which is another issue that's in the news and rising in importance for the administration. And we have a terrific panel coming together on that one. All that information is in your flyers. Thank you all again for coming. With that, I'm going to turn it over to my fellow board member, Lisa Schroeter. Thank you so much for joining us, Lisa. Thank you to all our panelists and guests for coming today. Lisa?
Thank you, Ken. And obviously, Ken's being far too modest because WIDA really is driving all this. This was clearly planned. We knew that this was going to be the fantastic week to do this. So since we get to talk about trade policy, which most of us now refer to as job security, there's clearly a lot to talk about. As Ken said, we're really going to focus on trying to tease out kind of the business interests, concerns, questions. I'm sure there will be plenty of those. But we want to make this a very lively discussion. Certainly, it's very timely. I'm Lisa Schroeter, Global Director of Trade Policy for the Dow Chemical Company. So as a manufacturer in the UK and the European Union, as well as an American company, clearly a key topic. But I'm thrilled to be part of this because I think this is a fantastic panel. I'm going to do a very quick introduction, and then we're going to go straight into having Heather explain everything that's happened to us. Or happened within Brexit. I really want to, you all have their bios, so I'm not going to read those, but what I love, and to tease out very quick for our amazing panel, is I love how much the typical Washington theme of crossover exists within the bios of everybody that we've got today. Starting with John Dickerman of the Confederation of British Industry, having worked on the Hill for 2 key congressmen, having worked in the District Court for the state of Maryland, working for the Department of Justice, and now obviously representing British industry here in Washington. I'm sure answering quite a lot of questions from London on what people are saying. We're lucky enough to have Pat Ivory as well, representing Irish business, the Irish Business and Employers Confederation. And what I love about Pat's experience is that representing Ireland not only to the EU institutions, but also on a much bigger global level, serving as the representative to Business Europe, chairing their US network, and representing all of us in your role as Vice Chair of the Trade Committee at BIAC, the Business Industry Advisory Council to the OECD. And of course, good friend Marjorie, who I am thrilled to say not only sits on the board of Women in International Trade, so representing a key constituency, but a career that has spanned covering all aspects of looking at trade policy, from working for Motorola to working for Senator Danforth to business for social responsibility, and now holding the fort as the champion of transatlantic trade at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. But we'll start with Heather, who as everybody knows, has had an amazing career across a wide range of critical positions. The State Department, starting in political and military, crossing over to economic and commercial, working with former Dep Sec Rich Armitage, consulting for many of us. But I'm thinking maybe it's the position you had post-state, working on disaster relief and American Red Cross probably qualifies you the best in your CSIS role to talk about Brexit. Let us know what you think. Wow.
Thank you, Lisa. Good morning, everyone. Mark has given me an impossible task. So I want your permission I'm going to do my best to sort of summarize where we are in 3 to 4 minutes, and then happy to take questions. Normally I prepare for these types of talks, but I find it just helpful to wake up in the morning and look just what had happened, and then to provide that analysis to you. So just stepping back, for the last nearly 3 years, the British government has been negotiating a withdrawal agreement with the European Union, all 585 glorious pages of that. The problem is that bill, as of yesterday, that agreement cannot receive approval by the House of Commons. It suffered a historic defeat on January the 15th, losing by 230 votes. It was replaced, it was put back again yesterday, the House of Commons, with some additional legally binding documents on the side, and it was historically defeated by, this time, 149 votes. This was the government's plan. This was the only agreement on offer. You had a choice: approve this agreement or no deal. This strategy has now failed. And what we're starting to see now is the government is now losing control of this process and is now coming to Parliament to make some decisions. The House of Commons has told the government what they do not want. Now they will start turning and shaping what they do want, possibly. So today's vote is, and we're not even sure what the final question, there's lots of amendments. The government has put forward a very complex a way of saying, do you want to leave the EU with a deal or with no deal? That will be changed, I think, through some amendments. But it is likely today, this evening, that the House of Commons will vote to make sure that the UK cannot leave the EU without a deal. So we know one thing: they want some type of an arrangement. The next day, there will be a vote, again we don't know the language of the actual vote, to extend the Article 50 negotiations. Now here's the complication on extending. The UK can ask for an extension. All 27 EU members have to accept an extension. The European Union has been very clear. An extension has to be for purpose. Why do you seek this extension? And then secondly, the duration of that extension. Will it be just a few weeks to try to sort some things out? Will it be for the longer term? An additional complication. The European Parliament is holding elections on May 23rd to May 26th. The EU would prefer to have a short extension to make sure that this doesn't cross into the European Parliament elections, because if it does, there's a potential that the UK must run candidates for the European Parliament elections. This is complicated for the UK because no one has started this process, because no one thought they would be in this place. And the EU has already distributed the 73 seats that the UK had taken, so that's a complicating factor. There may be a legal fix to that. I'm not even too sure I can explain that. So that's the question. And after this, the next 2 rounds of votes, then this goes to, we turn to then Brussels. There'll be a European Council meeting on March the 21st, which will talk about other things, but in fact that extension has to be decided. 1-7, we are at day 17 right now. So there's a lot of things happening there. So that is sort of where the Parliament action is. We woke up this morning to 2 new announcements from London. Number 1 is the waiving of unilateral checks at the Irish border. And it was also then sort of waiving, my understanding is 87% of goods that will cross in from tariff. This is totally confusing right now. We don't know what that means. We don't, because without border checks, it's one thing for one to unilaterally say no checks, but Ireland will have to now think about how to do that. And of course the tariff schedule is very confusing. So hopefully we find out more about that. So just a quick note on sort of the politics. Because the government has now lost control of this process, we're in a sort of uncharted constitutional crisis moment, because it's unclear now who's driving this process. And what we've seen over the last several weeks since the historic loss on January the 15th, you have a variety of cross-party initiatives to see if there is a majority for anything. So you have sort of two leading ideas. There are others, but the two leading ideas, one's called Common Market 2.0. This is really, some call it the Norway Plus option. It's a customs union. So it's I would call it the softer Brexit. It's a closest possible relationship, and there's cross-party support for that, but there's not a majority of support for that. The other thing that came out of the historic loss was this Malthouse Compromise. This is agreeing on paying the divorce bill, agreeing on the EU citizens and UK citizens' rights, but basically saying we're not going to deal with that backstop issue anymore. We're going to take that off the table, and we're going to a transition period where we'll work this out. The problem is, to depart the EU, you need a document, you need an agreement to withdraw. So this is the fear that we're getting close to crashing out by accident, that the time is running out. There needs to be an instrument to withdraw, and if there's not enough time to figure that out, or if there's not an extension given, then there just could be some accidents going on. And this is where everyone's starting to go, we really now do need to prepare for something accidental. We just run out the clock. Why is all of this important? I think sometimes we get so caught up in watching, and I don't understand it all myself, and I've probably mangled some of this explanation. This is so important. The UK is such an important partner to the United States, militarily, economically. We do everything together. We disagree on things, but they are our preferred ally. This is devastating. The European Union is very important to the United States. This is also devastating to the EU. We're going to feel those ramifications later. This is why this is so important for the United States, why we need to engage more than what we have. But I fear in 17 days, we'll have lots of different permeations. I can't tell you what will happen. I can't tell you what will happen tonight. So with that, your humble analyst passes the baton. Thank you.
Well, John, why don't you kick us off? So we have 17 days. How is British business reacting to this potential accidental policy set of changes and thinking about how they maintain their relationship with Europe and the US?
Thank you very much, Lisa. And thank you to Ken for having us here. I guess what probably makes the most sense as I answer your question is talk a little bit about who the CBI is, who we represent, what our members' position historically has been, and how we got here. And I'll try to do that as quickly as possible so we can get to the interesting part of this conversation instead of just listening to me speak. The CBI represents about 1/3 of the private sector in the UK, 190,000 businesses. So we're the largest business trade association in the UK. We represent every sector, small businesses, big businesses, you name it. But we don't just represent British businesses. We also represent foreign businesses that invest in the UK and have a large footprint in the UK. Dow, for example, a member of the CBI. Ahead of the referendum, we held a massive consultation, and over the course of the next couple of minutes, you'll hear me say consultation a million times and probably hear the number 80 a million times as well. Because we wanted to ask our members the very question about how important the UK's membership in the EU was. The response to that was 80% of our members said they wanted to remain within the single market and the EU, and only 5% of our members came back and said they prefer not to be part of the EU, and then 15% were undecided. We've got a pretty good idea where some of those 15% ended up voting. And this was in line with what our members historically have supported. We've never had a consultation with our members where less than 70% of our members came back and said that they support membership within the EU. So from a business perspective, there was a very clear answer going into the referendum about what they supported and what direction they wanted to look into. Now, of course, that being said, we respect the people's vote because, of course, we have to. In the aftermath of the referendum, our position was we need to ensure that business gets the best possible deal going forward. So we had another consultation after that to ask business, looking forward, what was important for the UK. And our members told us loud and clear that what they wanted was a UK that was open for trade and investment, and open to the people that business needs. And furthermore, that stability was incredibly important, particularly in terms of regulation and funding streams. To that end, the CBI developed some key principles about what the relationship with the EU needed to look like for business and to succeed. We needed a barrier-free relationship with our closest trading partner, an approach to regulation that prioritizes stability in particular, certainly in the short term, but of course balances cooperation, influence, and access to the EU in the long term. We needed a migration system in particular that gives business access to the skills and labor they need. And finally, an international agenda with business at its very heart, which of course means an active trade policy within the government, one that was liberal, open to trade, and I think to some degrees we probably will see that and have seen that. So that's kind of our historic perspectives and the perspectives immediately after the agenda, or the referendum rather. What are we doing present day? Well, yesterday didn't really change everything, but certainly I think clarified what our position needs to be and what our public position is going to be. Look, business in the UK is desperately concerned about the risks associated with a no deal. And I use the word desperately intentionally there. We're on the verge of a pretty big crisis, and while there's opportunity in the future, it's important to deal with the emergency in the present first and foremost. And our members have been very clear to us that this risk and this desperation is impacting their business decisions and their investment decisions. So as an organization, we're not jumping 2 and 3 steps in front of our members. Rather, perhaps are standing about a step ahead of our members to call on government for stability, to call on government for a very clear plan about which direction they're going to take the UK today and tomorrow. And every step of the way, we've consulted with our members on these issues. So we've had a very clear mandate from our members, from our management and executive board, on down to our regional and local councils, and we have 13 of those throughout the UK. So our position today, in the aftermath of yesterday's vote, preceding the votes today and tomorrow, is that we have to extend Article 50 to close the door on the potential for a no deal at the end of this month. It's urgent that we do that immediately. The extension should be short and as realistic as possible, and backed by a very clear plan. Because I think we have to be very frank about the fact that jobs and livelihoods are at stake. It's not a political discussion at this point. Certainly there's an aspect of that, but we're all impacted by trade on a daily basis. And jobs and livelihoods are at stake. 80% of our members prefer an extension to no deal. I'm sure that number sounds very familiar to you, because that's a number that really resonates when it comes to our members' position on the EU, position on the Brexit, position on stability. So that's where we're at now. I think perhaps I'll end on that note and happy to take questions after that.
Perfect. So Pat, similarly from an Irish business standpoint, others just mentioned unilateral checks at the border, lack of clarity from today's announcements. How is Irish business reacting, and what do we do? What's your Irish business community pushing for?
Thank you very much, Lisa, and thanks, Heather, for a really good analysis of where we are currently. It certainly is complex and not an easy way to find a path through it. Maybe just say a little bit about IBEC just for your audience. IBEC is, we do everything that the CBI does. In Ireland, we represent Irish business and international business in Ireland, and of course American business is hugely important to the Irish economy, and we have many of your companies, and we do a lot of partnership work with CBI and also with the US Chamber of Commerce and the National Association of Manufacturers and US CBI here in Washington. In addition to representing the voice of Irish business at Irish and European and global level, we also run 39 different trade associations, and we run them ourselves. They're not just associated to us, we actually run them, and we employ 240 people running these trade associations and offering the various policy advice to Irish business, and we also offer advice on industrial relations and employer relations. So we're a significant SME in our own right in the Irish market and in Europe. In terms of Brexit, we never wanted or wished for the UK to leave. We ran campaigns before the referendum to try to encourage the UK to stay. After the referendum, we produced toolkits and guides for our membership to try to deal with what we knew even at that time was going to be an incredibly difficult process. And the process has turned out even more complex and more difficult than we could have imagined. Our toolkit for Irish business has also been used by French business and by Danish business as templates for their own businesses to try to prepare for Brexit. And I'll come back to that contingency planning and preparing for Brexit in a moment. We also have engaged very deeply, not only with the Irish government in terms of preparing the Irish position on Brexit, and I must say that the Irish government and Irish business are very closely aligned in what they want from Brexit and what they feel is needed in order to make this exit orderly and to work for businesses both in Ireland and across the European Union. We've also engaged very deeply with Michel Barnier and his task force, and in fact I was in Brussels last week and met with Michel Barnier and had detailed meetings with members of his task force, again assessing where we are currently and what we can do together to try to support the UK in leaving the European Union, because we do respect the decision of the UK. It's a democratic decision. They've made that decision to leave, and we want to see that lead in an orderly way. I might say a little bit about the backstop. The first thing I'd like to say about the backstop is that one should not get the impression that the backstop is the main obstacle here. The backstop is really a proxy for everything that hard Brexiters don't like about the withdrawal agreement and the potential future relationship. So the Northern Ireland border situation it is a complex issue. It has to be resolved. But if this wasn't the issue, there would be many, many other issues which Rees-Mogg and the European Reform Group and others within the Tory party would be pointing out is wrong with the deal. Specifically on the backstop, this is designed specifically because we have an all-island economy, and that's built around the Good Friday Agreement. And the Good Friday Agreement is an international treaty in its own right. It was signed by Ireland and the UK, registered at the United Nations. It is a peace treaty and has made an enormous contribution to Northern Ireland and to the UK and to Ireland, and indeed to Europe, in terms of establishing peace on the island of Ireland. Those benefits should not be taken lightly. It has existed for 20 years and still there is the concern that a hard border and the establishment of a hard border would have a detrimental effect to that peace process in Ireland. And I must say at this juncture that we really appreciate enormously the support that Ireland and the UK indeed got from the United States in achieving that peace process. I mean, President Bill Clinton showed a personal interest in this. The Friends of Ireland caucus in the Congress and people like Richie O'Neill really have been tremendous supports in terms of that whole Good Friday Agreement and the Belfast Agreement, as it's also known as. The UK and the Irish government have both agreed on a number of occasions that there will be no hard border on the island of Ireland. And even the decisions overnight that you mentioned, where the UK is saying that they're going to have no checks for product coming from Northern Ireland into Southern Ireland, is in some way an expression of that desire for no hard border. But having a desire for no hard border and actually implementing it are two different things. And a big part of the negotiations for the last 3 years has been arriving at a mechanism which is acceptable to both the UK government and the EU in terms of how that situation would actually be implemented. And it's very important to understand that this agreement, this withdrawal agreement, was accepted by the UK government, and it was accepted by the EU, and they agreed on it. And it was only when the withdrawal agreement was put before the UK Parliament that it was rejected. And the backstop originally was designed just to deal with the Northern Ireland border. But then it was extended to a UK-wide backstop, with the UK remaining in the customs union and the single market for the period of the transition, which is up to the end of 2020. And again, it's important to acknowledge and recognise that that extension from Northern Ireland backstop to UK-wide backstop was actually a request of Theresa May and the UK government. And when the EU conceded to that, they didn't want to concede to it at the beginning, but they did concede to it after detailed negotiations. Then when that deal was put before the UK Parliament, it was rejected. And yesterday, despite the interpretive instrument, specifically on the backstop, and then the joint statement on the political declaration about the future, it was rejected for a second time. And there is no other deal. And this brings me to the third point, and that is the contingency planning, and whether or not we're now in a situation where we could have a crash out and a no-deal exit. Our position has always been that a no-deal exit is absolutely catastrophic, economically speaking, not only for Ireland but also for the UK and wider within the European Union. And we've done a huge amount of collaborative work with CBI, with John's colleagues in London and in Brussels, to try to emphasise business needs, and also with our business colleagues right across Europe, German business colleagues, French business colleagues, Scandinavian countries, the Netherlands, all who have very deep trading relationships with the UK. And in that context, nobody in European business wants to see the UK leave without a deal, because the economic impact of that for Europe, for the UK, is too great. And despite everybody's best efforts in terms of the authorities